Kick it off. So, hi everyone and welcome. We're excited to be wrapping up the 2020 webinar series with a fun one. This is Products, Promising and Packaging, Approaching Packaging Research with the Consumer in Mind. Bit of a tongue twister. But I'm Allison Gakowski. I'm the Director of Global Research here at HCD, and I'm so happy today to be joined by Marcella Markman, our Executive Vice President. So I see a lot of friendly faces joining us today as you all are logging on. So hi everyone and welcome. And I see a lot of new faces as well. So maybe we'll just go through a few housekeeping items before we get started. For those of you who might not be familiar with HCD, we're a consumer research house focused on integrating applied neuroscience, psychological, and behavioral methods into traditional cognitive techniques. And we really love for these sessions to be interactive and call this the end of year delirium or what you will. But Marcella and I have made a bet with some of our colleagues that at the end of this session, we can get more of a discussion going than ever before. So once we're done, what we're going to ask is if anyone wants to join us in a discussion. This can be asking questions or your perspective, or we're happy to just chit chat. But you can do this by raising your hand via the button at the bottom of the screen. And what we're going to do is unmute you so that you can talk. And so if Marcella and I win, we're going to be able to post a bunch of really embarrassing photos from our colleagues that you know and love on LinkedIn. And if we lose, our embarrassing photos are going to go up.
So we don't like to lose, so please help and make our bet come true.
But of course, if this isn't your thing, we always encourage questions via the Q&A feature on the platform too. So we welcome those as well. But you don't want to see Marcella's losing side.
So true.
So what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss how we can incorporate different methods into our packaging research to put the consumer at the forefront and develop a robust understanding of how to create a really great and long-lasting love story. Because maybe this love story starts on an impulse. It's the color, the shape, the je ne sais pas that catches your eye in the aisle or at checkout. Never in your life did you realize that you needed this product so much, but in that moment, you've never been so sure of something in your entire life. Or maybe it starts in an aisle, I don't know, the shampoo aisle, where you're uncapping and experiencing every product like a carefully choreographed round of speed dating, strategically evaluating all of your options, studying their pedigrees and making a really thoughtful selection. Or maybe you've already met your perfect match and it's something that you know and trust. But no matter what, this great love story always starts with anticipation and expectation. A package really sets expectation and it provides promises of what our experience will be. It can really be that start of the great love story or of great disappointment if our expectations aren't met. So let's take this Garnier Fructis shampoo, promising a clean and fresh experience. Now we're back in our aisle, right? We're uncapping all of our shampoos. And let's say we uncap this and it smells like pumpkin spice. We're going to be really disappointed. Now, yes, this is a really extreme example, but the foundation is so important. Every aspect of that package is setting our expectations for that product experience. So the name, the brand name, the color, the shape, the verbiage, everything within that package is giving us information of what we should expect. So if our package does not meet that promise, we're going to be disappointed. So how can we really ensure that our consumers find the perfect fit where our expectations are fulfilled and our love story prevails? Well, it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all answer or a method, but a carefully developed process that really starts from the infancy of product development and is carried through the whole life cycle. But today we're just going to focus on how a few tools from applied behavioral neuroscience can help establish really sound building blocks during that packaging development process that's going to help us achieve this harmony where our product is actually meeting the promises set forth through the package communication. And we're going to start with the consumer understanding. Packages play a huge role in our daily routines and become ingrained in our habits. And when these packages are optimized for our behaviors, it can make a world of difference. So starting from really ground zero to understand those daily routines and behaviors is really a first step in optimizing packages that we rely so heavily on. And then while this behaviorally driven design is really vital, package real estate, those messages, graphics, claims also have to be really carefully considered and optimized to encourage and secure that place in the consumer's routine that we were just talking about. We know the communication and creative development process for packaging can be no short of extensive. We want to ensure that all of that hard work leading up to this really works hard for us and efficiently and effectively for our brand and conveys those promises and expectations that we've tested so thoroughly before. And of course, all of this means nothing if our consumers don't see or can't find our product on the shelf or even online. So confirming that the packages can break through the clutter of the competition and be found easily by shoppers is really that gateway to the experiences with the product. So with that, let's start going through some of these different points. So Marcella?
Thanks so much, Allison. And just a reminder, I can't wait to see everybody's smiling faces and joining that conversation at the end of this. No one likes to lose a bet, so help a sister out. So I'm going to, as Allison mentioned, we have a wide array of research questions that come up in the packaging process. And our goal here is just to highlight a few different areas and the associated methods that we used. So you can kind of get a taste, depending where you're at or how comprehensive a process that you use, what's most important in the research process. So again, these are just tastes of these specific studies that we're going to represent. Our first one is about the ever so lovely diaper changing process and using a diaper cream. I'm so fortunate in our house, we just closed that chapter, chucked my diaper genie in a dumpster and set it on fire. So I'm thrilled that that phase of our life has now closed, but every parent knows the joys and struggles when it comes to the diaper changing process. And our client specifically here has been in the baby space for a while, but was looking to possibly innovate in the diaper cream area. And rather than necessarily differentiating themselves by the product specifically, how can they also optimize the actual usage of the product and the packaging to make a parent's life easier? So we used a couple different tools in this process that we'll walk you through. It was a two-prong approach. We looked at both an at-home audience to be able to go to a larger audience to quantify the experience, and we also did central location. So what we used at the at-home process was a smart speaker technology and a traditional component of a self-report questionnaire. I think we all who are parents know the experience of changing a diaper, right? We lay our child down, we're unlatching the messy diaper and enjoying that experience as it is. We're rescuing an alligator. That child is trying to do jailbreak in the middle of a poop-filled fest. We're working with wipes. We're trying to open a container of wipes and grab hopefully just one. We're grabbing 8. We are working on the cream. Are we unscrewing a jar? Are we squeezing out of a tube? What are we doing? So what the smart speaker technology allows us to do during this event or task of changing the diaper is more so capture the behavior in the process and maybe the duration and how long each experience is in each element. So we are able to see specifically how long the cream process might have taken amongst the larger routine itself, but really focusing on the routine as the parent is speaking to the process of each task that they're doing. They're removing the diaper, they're cleaning, they're applying the cream, etc. The smart speaker technology is just capturing this all for us to really understand that behavior. The complimentary quantitative survey before and after, we'll get more of that consumer language and the cues, routines, cues and rewards as well. Then when we look at the central location that we're able to complement that at-home approach with, that then builds in again to seeing the routine in action. So if we build on this slide, we'll be able to see that what we then, I'm sorry, if you can go to the next one as well, Allison, I just kind of spoke to this. So with the central location, we're going to actually use the in-person behavioral coding. So we'll be able to have videos recording the session, and we'll also have an in-person professional facial coder. So this is somebody that actually is professional at this, not actually using any type of camera or from that angle. But now we're experiencing and seeing, again, our parents actually cleaning, going through the diaper changing process. And we're focusing possibly on how they're doing that cream, whether it be, again, a jar, a tube, are they using one hand because they have their hands dirty, just the actual actions of it. And the facial coding is able to get parents and child's joys or frustrations during the process. We know our kids can either love it or hate it, depending on the day of the diaper changing process. And if they're mobile, forget it. You're hoping that you don't have even cream down their leg that they're now dragging on the couch because you couldn't get a clean diaper on fast enough. So this will allow us to actually see behavior being done. The facial coding will get us at the emotional experience, and then a qualitative piece component as well to interview the parents to find out that the more so the cues and the rewards in the process. Really think about that consumer technical model that we've probably spoken to in the past about to get understanding of cues, routines, and rewards. So we really have the behavioral driven aspect of understanding the routine, and we're looking at some consumer language from the other aspects of the research. So when you tie this all together, again, the objective is really to more so on this question was the functionality of the actual package and how they can utilize it and possibly make it more efficient and comfortable for a parent. So with the smart speaker technology, we're able to quantify that behavioral, get at the duration of it, the certain themes that keep popping up, the ease of dispense. The other elements of the emotional journey, again, thinking about it from the facial coding perspective, and then finally from the traditional measures of qualitative and quantitative research, just getting at that added language layer. So this question specifically, again, was to optimize more the functionality of the package, not necessarily the aesthetics of it, but how can they best design in a chaos of a process, something that is most easy to use for the consumer. The other case study I'll walk us through before kicking it back to Allison is now more on the aesthetics and the real estate and how to optimize that visual now that you have. And we used a combination of things like eye tracking, your traditional measures, and again, some psychological measures of implicit association test. And this was an at-home air fragrance that we had evaluated. So the objective here, again, they had a current that existed on shelf, and we're looking to test a redesign as well. And we really wanted to understand, are we meeting the needs of the consumer by doing a kind of understanding perspective as well in this study. So we used a combination of what we call our max implicit that you probably have heard us speak to as well. And doing the traditional element of the max diff really helps us prioritize the importance and the attributes of the product category specifically. So we want to know what is most driving to the consumer within the category as a whole. The implicit psychological test that we then conduct after is to understand how our brand is associated on these attributes versus the competition. And by combining our max implicit, we net out and understanding the need gaps of the consumer. So where is an opportunity that we can better connect with them or have better layout or communication on our package that can have a stronger association for us with what's most important to the consumer when making this purchase. So when we conduct the implicit association test, then again, maybe many of you are familiar with, have seen in our past, this was a simple go, no go association. Does the brand on screen match with the attribute that they're being exposed to? And again, it's to determine that psychological bias, that whether or not, how strong is our association with what's most important to the consumer in that category. So when looking at the results from the max diff, which prioritize those attributes, we learned that long-lasting, effective, and welcoming are the most critical features for the air freshener category as a whole. When we evaluated our brands versus the competition on the implicit association test, we see that we have a red flag because we do not have a high association with any of those key critical attributes. And what's most disturbing about it is that those messaging and claims are on our current pack. So we are expressing them, but somehow there's a disconnect with not having a strong association. So let's further diagnose and evaluate what that package issue might look like. So the package on the left was the original, and the package on the right was what they created as a modified prototype. And this was utilizing eye tracking technology for in-person research. So look at the concept on the left of the package. That gold star in the top right corner was your typical new and improved type of highlight there. And we can see that it's almost on an island on its own and not really making any critical impact. That first box they do get to is our welcoming and long-lasting message. So they do look there first, but it's first and it's a shorter exposure. They spend more of their time on the essential oils messages, and then they finally land on box 5 there in the top left corner about the brand. So just looking at it, we don't have a strong connection with our key messages to the brand. We're losing any value that the new and improved might be able to generate. And this is possibly what's occurring as to why we're not having a strong association with what's most important to the consumer. If we look at the modified prototype, that's a open box cutout of the actual product device itself with the brand on it. So that's the first thing they now look at. They have a strong connection immediately with the brand image. The new and improved is now tied into the effective messaging. So now you're actually having a more impact with the new and improved because you're tying it in to what's critical to your consumer. And that's immediately after a brand exposure. They then move on and they get to the long-lasting messaging as well, hit the brand in the top left corner right after that, and then they make their way to the essential oils. So by modifying the real estate that you have to work with, and you still have the same messages of what's critical to the consumer, but placing them in a more optimal way, we're going to have a impact that the effective messaging is paired with new and improved. So that's going to get highlighted and stand out. We have reinforced branding moments, especially with the long-lasting message as well. We're optimizing that experience. So the idea is that you would hope to see a better connection with the key messages of what's important to the consumer. So this again is a little bit more visual aesthetics and the importance of the design and using your real estate in an optimal way. The first was more so getting that consumer understanding of early maybe prototype and feeding into the design element. And then Alex will talk us through the final one.
Yeah. So let's talk about how then we can ensure that these packages that we've developed the consumer understanding, we've optimized it visually, how can we really ensure that this is going to break through in an on-shelf environment, whether that be online or in person? So leveraging tools like eye tracking and behavioral coding are going to allow us to quantify the consumer behaviors, and the traditional qual and quant will add color that's going to allow us to really thoroughly understand that shopping experience. So in this specific example, we wanted to confirm that a renovated pack was going to be able to break through the environment and really be easily found by the consumers. And the action standard was that the pack performs better than the current design in terms of this breakthrough and findability. And what we had them do in this research was start with a natural exploration. So by directing consumers that came in person to do this shopper research, directing them to shop just specifically for a product category as they naturally would, we're able to understand what that natural path of navigation is with their eyes, as well as their behaviors, like what products did they pick up? Did they touch? Did they ultimately purchase? And this step really allows us to understand, is the product and the pack able to break through that cluttered environment? Does a consumer see it? Do they interact with it? And then after this step, what we do is we kind of take them aside and we uncover some qualitative feedback about what stood out to them. So this step builds on that natural exploration and that breakthrough insight by understanding kind of cognitively what respondents are able to recall from that experience, and really if that pack of interest is even mentioned. And next, we want to explore how easily can that pack be found. So we bring them back to the shelf and we ask the consumer to shop for a specific brand and SKU within that product category. And here we're able to note really how quickly can that pack be identified. And then finally, we close it out with a quant survey to gain deeper insights into that shopping experience. So this technique can take place either in a real store environment, in a mocked up environment, or at a central location, or even online. But to identify really what's the right design for your research, there's a few things to consider, and I'm just going to quickly touch on some of the key differences between an in-person approach versus an online approach. And the first is precision. So the technology that's used in an in-person setup, such as eye tracking glasses, offer much more precision than online eye tracking solutions that use a webcam. And this is just really a nature of the technology. So as you can see, the two gray boxes there, the box on the left is the in-person eye tracking using something such as the online eye tracking or the eye tracking glasses or a stationary eye tracker, where the box on the right there used a webcam-based technology. And what we see is that on the right, that bleed over rate from the online option is really troublesome when we're thinking about a shelf environment where it may really be difficult to clearly start to distinguish between some of our areas of interest or our packs with that bleed over. And then that then makes drawing conclusions a little bit challenging in that online environment, whereas we have the precision that we need when we're using more sensitive technology in person. And another thing to consider is just how realistic the environment is. I mean, besides the obvious in-person versus a mocked up digital shelf, if it's not an online shopping kind of platform that we're looking at, but oftentimes even how the package translates into that online or digital landscape isn't really considered before the research starts. And some of those nuances are lost in the package. So it's not really being displayed as optimally as it would be, or as it would be kind of viewed and experienced in an in-person setting. And finally, thinking just about scope, in person, it can be more costly with longer timelines, while an online approach might benefit from easy nationwide fielding at a faster pace. But it's also important to note that with online eye tracking, we have a throwaway rate of about 70% of the data is considered bad data. So that really requires a hefty amount of over-recruiting. With this combination of the eye tracking and the behavioral coding, it allows us to go beyond just your traditional heat maps and gaze plots. So yes, these are still really crucial to the story, and we can quantify our findings even further based on those key objective and action standards by just taking this information a little bit further. And the way that we do that is by creating a scorecard that very clearly outlines whether we indeed met the action standard or did not. So, for example, thinking about breakthrough, we can kind of quantify what is the percentage of the respondents who actually saw the package during that natural shopping exploration. How long did it take for them to look at it? And when did they look at it? Was it earlier in the time frame or over the entire course of their shopping experience? And did they ultimately touch it? Did they interact with the pack, or did they ultimately purchase it? And for ease to find, we can quantify really how quickly they were able to first look at the pack in that task-based exercise where they're asked to find a specific SKU. But going beyond that, just because they looked at it, when did they then cognitively kind of identify that that was the correct pack and kind of make us aware that they have found it? And then finally, how successful overall was the consumers in actually finding the correct pack? Or was there something else that was interfering with that? Was there another product that was interfering with that? So this kind of approach, the behavioral coding plus the eye tracking in terms of looking at that standout or that breakthrough and that ease to find the certain products, it helps us understand, is all of this hard work that we've done from understanding the consumer to creating really behaviorally driven packages that have then been optimized from all that communication work that has been done to this point and put on that pack, is that real estate being optimized? And now, you know, in the environment, how does it play out? Is it still being really successful? Can it break through and can the consumers find it? So with that, we're going to welcome anyone who would like to join us. Please raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. But while we're waiting for those, maybe we have any questions that came up or chats.
Yeah, Allison and I didn't want to do a death by PowerPoint. We really wanted it to be an engaging conversation with you all and just, you know, have an open discussion about it. So we are really hoping that you're all going to still jump on right now, but we'll start with some questions in the meantime.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a question. So when we say there's a high dropout rate for some of the measures, do we think that those that still remain in the sample are representative of the larger general population? So that's a really good question. So, and I'm just talking about, I think this question is directly to the kind of the online eye tracking, right? Because we recruit all of our participants, screened in via our screening criteria, and then we throw away 60% of that data. And it really does beg the question of who actually is our sample now when we throw that away. And this is just kind of one of the issues that arise with online eye tracking. And yes, there's loads of benefits to it, but it is something that we really have to take into consideration and weigh before the research begins and have that understanding that we're going to throw away 60% of this. Now, can we overall kind of manage that as the fielding is going on? And that's typically what we do. So any type of quotas that we have in place, we try to balance that as we're seeing what the bad data is and throwing that away. But it's a really good point. There's a lot of things with online tools. So whether that be, you know, online facial coding, online eye tracking, that isn't always considered. You know, something else that's really important when we think about the online kind of measurements, online eye tracking, or even online facial coding is the difficulty it is to get people to turn their webcams on, which is really a challenge that we've had in the past. A lot of people really respect their privacy. There's Zoom burnout at this point. So there's some considerations and tactics that need to be in place prior to the research.
Nice. See, we have another question, and Michelle's joined us as well. She doesn't count because she's internal, but I'm going to shoot this question over.
I thought I would count.
I'm going to actually shoot this question over to you, Michelle, since you joined. And Eileen, I'm going to call you out. If you want to come on video, please do join us. But yes, a great question. And I think Michelle's, one of her specialties is as well in behavioral coding. So while she's here, you mentioned that facial coding is done by a person. How's behavioral coding done? If you want to talk to that.
Sure. So facial coding originally was always done by a professional. It wasn't until after it was developed that facial action coding, FACS, was put into a software program to be able to analyze video. So that can really be done either way, and there are advantages and disadvantages to both ways. When we use behavioral coding, we do use actual behavioral coders, people that analyze the behaviors, but we use a software system from Noldus that's specifically designed for behavioral coding. So it's able to quantify things either by the amount of time somebody does something, or the number of times. You can do frequency, you can do duration, all sorts of really helpful things for codes that are pre-existing. And there's sort of two different ways of doing behavioral coding. One is the quantitative, one is the qualitative. So you can either code every action that happens on a small number of people, or you can look for very specific codes that you're most interested in a quantitative way to go about showing statistical changes. So I hope that kind of explains, Eileen, but feel free to jump in and talk if that wasn't clear.
So we've done everything from actually being in store, and there's some considerations to have with that. Obviously, there's other shoppers in the environment. People are purchasing products off the shelf. And what's so important when we're thinking about eye tracking is to be able to have that consistent experience or that consistent reference image, if you will, across the participants. So there's some challenges that come with that. Obviously, getting the store permission, kind of managing any other customers that are in the store typically will want to do some off hours. But it's also, we have to make sure that that shelf looks exactly the way it did for every respondent before that. In other situations, we've actually built shelves and stocked those shelving units ourselves, having that better control. You don't have people purchasing anything off of your shelves. You can control any other type of traffic because there is none. And also it's great because we can have some live streaming to clients, which is really nice, especially right now when we know travel is limited. And then in the online environment, I see a question here as well. So it can be either a mocked up store environment. So you're looking at kind of a digitalized shelf where, this is maybe pre the packages, prototypes even being furnished at that point, and we just have those 2D images. That's fine as well. There's just some things that we have to consider and make sure we understand before going into the research. Or if it's an online environment, so, I'm doing all my grocery shopping from home now, looking at that type of environment can also be mocked up. And it's just a matter of what is that research question? How are we weighing the pros and cons of each of those environments? So whether it's at a traditional central location where we're building our own shelf or in the in-store environment, it's just about looking at those different options and considering what's going to be right for us to give us the answers that we need, looking at what the action standards are. Can we achieve these action standards based on this environment? We don't have our own facilities. We partner with, whether it be the Schlesingers of the world, the Opinions of the world. Hey, Chris, you on here? Or if you have your own facility where you bring consumers in, all of the technology is completely portable. Essentially, it's a kind of James Bond looking silver briefcase that we carry around. So it can be done anywhere.
So Implicit can be done on a lot of different experiences. So it could be at the brand level. We've certainly done it at the sensory attribute level, or in the experience level, like overall, maybe with specific aspects of device, for example, versus a brand. Sensory aspects, it could be fragrance, could be flavor, it could be any number of things. It could be lotion on skin. We've done all of those sort of things. You do need to tweak the methodology a little bit. So if you're doing the difference, between brand implicit versus, a taste implicit, you do have to take into account and design around the different experience that the person is having. But we do relate the two together to build that overall understanding of how somebody is experiencing a product, in context to that point. So, if you do have them experiencing something in a store versus, at home or wherever they might be, then that's where it can be really handy to have like those multiple pieces. So we've done them separately. They're not always done together, I guess, is the first thing that I would say. And certainly we've changed that order before as well. And sometimes they're not even on the same group. So it really depends on the research that we're doing, because certainly the questions you ask before an implicit can influence the implicit. And so when we do have the same person doing both aspects, we try to start with the implicit first, because we don't want any sort of bias to go into that situation. It's more when we're building the story and we're trying to understand how one piece fits into another, that we'll look at the max diff first to see, okay, these are the priorities of the consumers, and then, say these are the perceptions, to really figure out like where things go.
eye tracking is one technology that you definitely can use to see visually what they were looking at. We've also complemented oftentimes with even our biometric methods, more of the physiological response to see visual attention is one thing, but is it also actually, are they paying attention and storing information they're presented with? So you can definitely diagnose what you're seeing from the IAT with, I would say, multiple different technologies or methods, but eye tracking was one great way for us to evaluate the real estate and the visual layout. But there's other complements too. I don't know if Michelle or Allison have anything else to add to that.
Right. I mean, in some cases, that step comes, that max implicit step where we're looking to see, kind of diagnose, okay, I like to think of the max step of who are we? So that's kind of the implicit part. What are the perceptions of our brand? And then the max diff is where do we need to be? So when we think about it that way, it oftentimes is coming even before that packaging is redesigned or redeveloped to diagnose, is there anything that there is a kind of, maybe we're not being associated with anything, like we saw an example, or other situations is that all the competition in that specific product space really isn't differentiated from one another. And there's potentially this kind of niche, this unmet need that would be a high ranking on the max diff, meaning it's a high priority for consumers, yet none of the competition is meeting that need. Well, maybe that's a space and an opportunity for our brand to move into this unmet need, into this space. And we can take that understanding and then develop the packaging, or potentially it's not even the packaging at that point. It could be new positioning, new messaging, trying to, maybe we're going down and trying to prove out some new claims, for example. So that, I love the max implicit so much. It's so versatile and can be used in so many different kind of pieces along that line.
And Shannon, I think when you were asking about, how does the, adding that in with the eye tracking, I think diagnostic, like Allison was saying, is really the key there, because, there was a client we were working with once, and they were saying, well, for some reason, we're not being seen as X, Y, and Z, but we have X, Y, and Z listed right there on the package. It says that we're this, this, and this. How come they're not seeing us as that? And when we did the eye tracking diagnostic, you can see that, oh, yes, you have it on your pack, but nobody's even paying attention to that. Very few people even saw that messaging. And when they did, they didn't really take that information in, obviously. So that can be a really good diagnostic tool to see, okay, why are you not being seen as that? Is it that, because when we test the product separately itself, people are interpreting the product as being X, Y, and Z. So when they look at the brand, how come they're not getting that? And so really being able to marry those things in together can certainly build up that perception.
Regarding, in our diaper example, what did you learn from the smart speaker survey? Like, what questions did you ask? Also, have you experimented with smart speaker surveys away from home, example, mobile via cell phone? So I'll quickly talk to that, and then you ladies, you can add in as well. The smart speaker example, and specifically the diaper changing example, wasn't necessarily to be fed questions as they were doing the process, but more so track the routine and time spent. So that was in that specific example. But we've had, smart speaker technology is obviously a recent partnership for us as well, and actually have seen experiences where we are fed questions during a routine. So ask when, say, taking a shower is an example that we often give, that the smart speaker is asking questions throughout the experience and routine for then the consumer to then answer. So again, it would depend on the research question and what the smart speaker can then aid in, but it is nice having that component to actually track behavior during the experience. Mobile via phone, I'm not sure, Michelle.
Yeah, you can certainly do it. I don't believe we've done a survey in that way with, because you can, for example, you can, and anybody who has an Alexa device, just realized I'm going to say the name Alexa, you can download, an Alexa service on your cell phone. You don't have to use it through, an Echo Dot or whatever it might be. And so, you can certainly do it on your phone or any other sort of mobile device. And so, yeah, you could do it away from home. The issue is that maybe you're in a noisier situation. And so it might be difficult for the smart speaker app in that sense to hear you all the time. But those are, we have designed around those sort of issues. We just haven't actually used the mobile version of Alexa as an example. Allison, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, Michelle, just to add to your point, a great example, go back to the shower. The Alexa has multiple microphones. That's easier to be able to pick up your voice over the running water. Whereas your smartphone, it might have more difficulty and a lower maybe accuracy rate of picking up your response because of that external noise. So I think it's certainly looking at what is the specific research and what that environment is. Is this more appropriate for, could this be appropriate for mobile, or is it really important to do this with the actual devices?
There are other types of mobile apps that you can use. For example, we have used different types of diary apps to be able to track behaviors. I think we did a study with smoking, for example, where most people aren't smoking in their homes necessarily, and so they might be going outside, or maybe when they're in the car, or at some other sort of location, you know, in the before COVID times. And so you can still track people's behavior in that sense using things outside of even smart speaker surveys. So there's a couple of ways to go about things, and we always like to start with the research question first to decide which is the best way to measure it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Marcella, I feel like we won.
Oh, we won.
What does that mean?
We got Charlie,
of
Shannon, Dan was on for a hot minute. We did lose him, but that's 3, and I'm counting it as a win. So your job later is to check out our HCD LinkedIn page for some very exciting pictures of our.
Oh no, is it going to be Glenn? I hope Glenn.
Yeah, it will be Glenn, little splash of Michelle, maybe some other people. So keep your eyes out. This was a success, and we really truly appreciate you all joining on, because, you know, in this world that we're all living in, I personally really miss the, you know, intimate settings that we were able to have as, you know, smaller groups working together. And rather than always just talking at you, we really, you know, loved to be able to see some faces and have that conversation that way. So we sincerely appreciate it from that perspective, but also from helping us win the bet. So.
And we will see you all in 2021, hopefully for a much better year.
Thanks so much.
All right,
everyone.
thanks everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.